Zawadi stood at the window of her new apartment in Maquila Heights, staring at the city lights with hope glimmering in her eyes. For years, she had shared a cramped room with her siblings, sacrificing her comfort to help at home. She worked long hours at a busy market stall, saving every coin until she finally had enough to rent a small, modest place of her own. This new chapter felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to prove she could build something for herself. But not everyone was happy for her. Back in the crowded family home, Meretta watched her sister leave with a cold stare. She didn't understand why Zawadi would want to abandon her family. Meretta felt like Zawadi thought she was better than everyone else. Every time she saw her sister packing, that jealousy twisted deeper. "Go," she'd mutter under her breath. "Let's see how long you last." When Zawadi finally walked out with her bags, Meretta couldn't hold back her bitterness. She scoffed and sneered, telling her, "You'll regret leaving us behind." Even though Zawadi heard those words, she didn't look back. She was determined to make it. Her new space was small, but it was hers, clean, quiet, and full of possibility. She spent her first night there sitting on the floor, eating a simple dinner, and smiling to herself. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Meanwhile, Meretta's resentment grew. She imagined Zawadi living a glamorous life and felt left out. Instead of working toward her own dreams, she talked badly about her sister to everyone who would listen. But time passed, and things didn't go the way Meretta expected. Zawadi wasn't living a luxury life. She was still working hard, still struggling, but she was proud. She learned new skills, met new people, and slowly started to rise. Zawadi didn't forget her family. She sent help when she could, even if it wasn't appreciated. One day, Meretta heard people praise Zawadi's success. They said she was doing well, helping others, and proving herself in the city. Meretta felt a strange mix of anger and regret. She realized that while she wasted time hating, her sister kept moving. In the quiet moments alone, she wondered if she had been wrong. Maybe Zawadi didn't abandon them. Maybe she was showing them it was okay to dream bigger. The city of Maquila Heights watched as the sisters' paths unfolded, one driven by courage, the other held back by envy. But deep inside, a spark of hope remained that one day, they might understand each other again. Zawadi stepped into her small studio apartment on Bana Road with a smile she couldn't hide. It wasn't big, but it felt like freedom. She had dreamed of this moment for years. The building was old but full of life, with neighbors who greeted her every morning. She bought second-hand furniture from a local thrift shop, an old wooden table, a slightly worn-out sofa, and a tiny bed with a colorful sheet she found at the market. She placed potted plants all around the space, plants she had bargained for at a busy street stall. Each one made the room feel alive. Slowly, she transformed the studio from a plain room into a warm, peaceful place she could finally call home. Every night, she sat by the window and watched the people of Bana Road walking, laughing, living. The sounds of distant music mixed with street vendors calling out their prices. The city was loud, but her little space was calm, just how she liked it. She felt proud even if it wasn't perfect because she did it all by herself. But one thing bothered her. Her phone stayed silent. There were no calls, no texts, nothing from Meretta. At first, she checked her phone every few minutes. Maybe her sister would soften. Maybe she'd send a message. But the days turned into weeks, and the silence continued. Zawadi tried to push away the sadness. She knew Meretta was still angry, still hurt, still full of blame. Yet deep inside, she missed her sister deeply. On some days, she'd sit on the edge of her bed and imagine what she would tell Meretta if she called. She wanted to say she wasn't trying to leave the family behind. She just wanted a chance to breathe. She wanted to grow, to prove that someone from their crowded home could make a better life. Every new morning, Zawadi kept moving forward. She cooked small meals in her tiny kitchen, watered her plants, and continued working harder at her job. Slowly, people started noticing her talent and hard work. And even though Meretta said nothing, she still wished her sister could see how far she had come. Zawadi's new life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and she was learning to live it with courage, one quiet day at a time. Zawadi sat in her little studio after a long day, a cup of hot tea in her hands and soft music playing in the background. The air felt peaceful, just the way she liked it. Her plants leaned toward the window, her second-hand sofa felt like home. And for a moment, She forgot all her worries. But then, a sudden knock echoed through the room. It startled her. No one ever came by unannounced. She wasn't expecting any visitors, especially not this late. Her heart beat a little fast as she walked to the door. When she opened it, she froze. Standing outside under the yellow hallway light was Meretta. Her face was wet with tears, her hands shaking like leaves in the wind. She looked thinner, tired and lost. A small suitcase sat by her feet. It was a sight Zawadi never imagined she'd see. Meretta, the sister who once mocked her for leaving, now stood here trembling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Meretta's voice cracked as she whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." Her pride was gone. The fire in her eyes had burned out. All that remained was pain and exhaustion. She lifted her eyes slowly and added, "Please, can I stay?" Zawadi's heart softened instantly. All the anger she once felt disappeared. Without any hesitation, she stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said gently. Meretta walked in slowly, looking around at the small room that Zawadi had made her own. She sat on the sofa quietly, her eyes still full of tears. Zawadi brought her a cup of warm tea and a blanket. She didn't ask any questions yet. For now, she just wanted her sister to feel safe. As Meretta sipped her tea, she finally started talking. She spoke about life at home, how everything had fallen apart, how she felt lost and alone. She admitted she had been wrong. She regretted her words. She realized Zawadi wasn't trying to leave them behind. She was trying to rise. The silence between them broke and slowly, the distance began to fade. That night, in the small studio on Bana Road, two sisters sat together again. Not as enemies, but as family. The room felt warmer than ever. Zawadi knew things would not be perfect overnight, but this was a beginning. A small, fragile chance to rebuild what was broken. Zawadi took a deep breath as she stood in the small space of her studio, staring at her sister sitting on the sofa. She still cared about Meretta, but she remembered the past, the rude comments, the cold treatment, the jealousy. She didn't want her new life falling apart because of old habits. So she made up her mind. She could let Meretta stay, but only with strict rules. "If you're going to live here," she said in a calm but firm voice, "you follow my conditions." Meretta looked up, her expression unreadable. "No drama," Zawadi continued. "I can't deal with fights or tension in my home." Meretta nodded slowly. "No borrowing money," Zawadi added, her voice sharper this time. She had worked too hard to save what little she had. She couldn't afford to start handing out cash or fixing someone else's mistakes. Meretta's eyes dropped to the floor. Lastly, Zawadi said, "And no attitude. I won't tolerate disrespect in my space." Her voice was steady, her message clear. She wasn't going to risk her peace again. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint buzz of the street outside. Meretta lifted her head and nodded again. "I understand," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost too soft. Zawadi watched her closely. On the outside, Meretta looked humble, defeated, and ready to stay in line. But there was something in her eyes, something quick and hidden. A flicker, like a shadow running behind her words. It was there just for a second, but Zawadi saw it. A spark of something. Maybe pride, maybe a secret. Still, she let her in. Meretta rolled her suitcase into the corner and sat quietly. She looked grateful, but Zawadi couldn't shake the strange feeling. She wondered if her sister really meant her promise, or if something else was growing behind that silence. She tried to push the thought away, hoping she was wrong. Maybe Meretta just needed time to soften. That night, the apartment felt different. Two sisters under one roof again, but not like before. Zawadi tried to relax, but her mind stayed awake. She had opened her door because she believed in family, but she also knew one thing clearly. The peace she built was not something she would ever give up again. Not even for her sister. At first, everything seemed perfect. Meretta woke up early, tidied the place, and even made breakfast before Zawadi left for work. She washed dishes with a smile and hummed as she swept the floor. Zawadi felt a small relief. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe Meretta had changed. The apartment smelled of cooking spices and fresh flowers picked from the roadside. For once, they ate together peacefully, laughing like they used to when they were younger. Zawadi began to believe this could work. But slowly things took a turn. One evening, Zawadi came home and heard loud laughter before she even got to the door. She stepped inside and found Meretta sitting on the sofa, talking to someone on speakerphone. The voice on the other end was shouting and laughing. Meretta didn't even lower her voice when Zawadi walked in. She just waved and continued talking loudly, as if it was her own place. The piece Zawadi worked so hard for was being pushed out, one call at a time. Soon it got worse. Meretta began inviting people over, friends Zawadi had never met. Loud girls with loud music who stayed for hours, using Zawadi's things and leaving without even saying thank you. One night, Zawadi came home to find 3 strangers lounging in her living room, eating snacks she bought with her own money. Meretta introduced them as if it was normal, as if this small studio was theirs to use too. Then the small messes started. At first a few cups in the sink, then whole plates stacked up for days, clothes thrown on the sofa, half-eaten food left on the table. The kitchen became a disaster. Zawadi felt trapped in her own home. She stopped playing music. She stopped sitting by the window. Even her plants seemed to droop from the stress. The piece she had created was slipping away, inch by inch, replaced by chaos. Every night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone wrong so fast. She tried to remind herself of the conditions she had set, but now she felt too tired to argue. Meretta still smiled in the mornings, still acted helpful when she wanted something, but her actions showed a different story. And Zawadi began to realize that maybe the flicker she saw in her sister's eyes on the first day had been a warning after all, one she didn't want to face. One evening, Zawadi sat on the edge of her bed and opened her small metal box, the one where she kept her savings. She always counted her money every week to stay on track, but this time something felt wrong. Her hands shook as she counted. Some of the cash was missing. Not just a little. A big chunk was gone. She checked again, hoping she made a mistake, but no, it was truly gone. Her heart dropped, and her chest tightened. That money wasn't just money. It was her hard-earned security, her rent, her food. She had trusted her space, trusted her sister. But now trust felt like a dream. She walked into the living room quietly, her face calm but her eyes burning with disappointment. Meretta was sitting on the sofa scrolling her phone, her feet up on the table. Zawadi cleared her throat and asked, "Did you take my money?" Meretta froze for a moment, then her face twisted. As fast as lightning, she stood up and snapped, "How dare you accuse me?" Her voice filled the small room like thunder. Zawadi kept her voice low, trying to stay calm. "It's missing," she said. "And you're the only one here." That was enough to set Meretta off. She exploded. "You're heartless," she screamed. "You think I'm a thief? You've become so cold." Her words came like arrows. "You used to be kind. Now you're selfish. Ever since you moved out, you think you're better than us." Each word stabbed Zawadi in the heart. She stood in silence, her eyes filled with pain, but she didn't yell back. She had heard these cruel words before, back in the old house, when she first dared to dream of something better. Meretta paced the room angrily, pointing fingers, shouting, never stopping to listen. But not a single sound came from Zawadi. She just listened, her face steady, her eyes slowly turning cold. Inside her, something was changing. Her breaking point was close. The home she had built was no longer safe. Love wasn't enough anymore, not when it was mixed with betrayal and lies. That night, as Meretta slammed the bedroom door, Zawadi sat alone in the living room, staring at her dim plants. The silence felt heavy. Something had to change, and for the first time, she wondered if she would need to do the hardest thing yet, let go even if it hurt. That morning, Zawadi returned from work earlier than usual, her feet tired but her heart ready for peace. She was looking forward to a quiet moment with tea, maybe a nap. As she climbed the stairs, she heard loud music shaking the walls. Her eyes widened. That wasn't normal. She rushed toward her door, and what she saw when she pushed it open made her freeze in shock. Her apartment was crowded with strangers. People she had never seen before stood in every corner, laughing, shouting, dancing. Chairs were pushed aside. Her plants moved to the floor. The smell of spicy food and cheap alcohol filled the air. The beautiful rug she had saved up to buy was stained with drinks and smashed cake. Someone had dropped greasy plates on her sofa. A group of boys was even sitting on her bed, eating and jumping. And right in the middle of the chaos was Meretta. She was dressed up, dancing wildly like it was her own place. Music blasted from the speakers she had brought in. She smiled and cheered like nothing was wrong. Zawadi just stood there, frozen in disbelief. All she could think was, this wasn't her home anymore. This was madness. She tried to speak, but her voice got trapped in her throat. How could Meretta do this? After all the warnings, after all the fights, after everything she had offered her? Zawadi walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the dirt, the disrespect, the strangers who didn't even care who she was. One of them even smirked as he brushed past her, holding a drink that spilled on the floor she cleaned every day. Meretta finally noticed her. Instead of guilt, she gave a careless smile and shouted over the music, "Come on! It's just a celebration." Zawadi's heart pounded. Just a celebration? In her space, without her permission, after everything they had fought over? That was it. Every bit of patience she had left evaporated. Every second of silence she had held back exploded inside her. In that moment she knew, this couldn't continue. Her peace was gone, her trust was gone, and now, even her home was gone. The final line had been crossed. It was time to take her life back, no matter how hard the next steps would be. Zawadi didn't scream. She didn't grab anything or throw anyone out. She simply walked to the center of the room and switched off the music. The speakers went silent, and everyone looked up. The sudden quiet was louder than any argument. With a calm but firm voice she said, "The party is over. Everyone needs to leave." No one moved at first, surprised by her tone. Then one by one, they grabbed their things and shuffled out, avoiding her eyes. Some whispered, some glared, but Zawadi didn't care. She watched them leave with an expression as cold as stone. When the last guest stepped out and closed the door, only Meretta remained. The apartment was a mess, crumbs everywhere, a torn napkin stuck to the wall, drinks soaked into the rug. The place Zawadi had tried to make beautiful was ruined. She turned to her sister, who suddenly looked much smaller than before. Meretta's shoulders dropped as she stared at the floor. Zawadi took a steady breath, looked her directly in the eyes, and said, "You need to move out. Today." Her voice didn't shake this time. It was steady, clear, and final. The room went silent again, heavier than before. Meretta looked up, her eyes full of shock. They quickly filled with tears. She stepped forward and whispered, "Where will I go?" Her voice trembled with fear. This wasn't the bold, loud girl who shouted insults and danced like nothing mattered. This was someone who realized she had gone too far. But Zawadi didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or offer excuses. She just stood there, strong and tired. "That's not my problem anymore," she said quietly. Her words weren't cruel. They were honest. She had given chances, opened doors, offered help. But now she was choosing herself. Her peace meant more than holding on to a broken bond. Meretta's tears rolled down. But Zawadi didn't rush to comfort her. She had done that before, many times. Now, she just watched as her sister slowly picked up her suitcase, eyes red, heart heavy. There were no more second chances left. That day, the bond between the sisters was tested like never before. And Zawadi finally chose her own peace over someone else's chaos. A few days passed after the confrontation. The apartment was quiet again. Zawadi cleaned up the mess, washed the dishes, and scrubbed the rug until it looked almost new. Her plants seemed to stand taller, as if they too were relieved. The silence felt different now. It wasn't heavy or sad. It was peaceful. Zawadi finally had her space back. Then one afternoon, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was Meretta. For a moment, Zawadi just stared. She wondered if she should even answer. But after a deep breath she picked up. Meretta's voice was soft, almost broken. There was no anger this time, no excuses, no fake sweetness. Just honesty. "I'm sorry," she said. Not the kind of sorry that tries to end a fight quickly, but the kind that comes from real understanding. She didn't apologize for getting caught or for losing her place. She apologized because she finally realized how deeply she had hurt Zawadi. She said she now understood how much work it took to build a peaceful life, how many sacrifices, how many lonely nights, how much strength. She didn't ask Zawadi to let her move back in. Instead, she asked for something different. "I don't want to live with you again," she whispered. "But I want to start over. As sisters. Without lies. Without jealousy." Her voice trembled like someone holding hope carefully in their hands. Zawadi listened quietly. She didn't rush to forgive. She didn't say it's okay. Because it wasn't. But she heard something new in her sister's voice, a softness that wasn't there before. She knew trust wouldn't come back in a day, but maybe this was the beginning of healing. After a long pause, Zawadi said, "We can talk. We can take it slow." Her voice wasn't cold anymore. It was cautious, but open. She wasn't letting Meretta back into her home, but she was giving her one last chance to rebuild something different this time. Something honest. That day, one phone call didn't fix everything, but it planted a seed. Maybe the sisters could still grow, separately, but side by side. And for the first time in a long while, Zawadi didn't feel tired. She felt strong and ready for whatever came next. Zawadi spent the morning browsing small apartments in the neighborhood near Bana Road. She wanted something simple, affordable, and safe for Meretta. A place where her sister could have her own space without interfering with Zawadi's life. After a few calls and visits, they found a tiny room in a shared house. It was nothing fancy, just a small bed, a desk, and a window that let in sunlight. But it was enough. Meretta's eyes lit up when she saw it. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without guilt or tension. Zawadi felt a quiet satisfaction knowing she had helped her sister find independence, the same independence she had fought for. Moving in was awkward at first. Meretta unpacked slowly, keeping her distance. Zawadi didn't push. She respected her sister's new space and made sure to check in only when needed. They started small, short conversations over tea, messages asking if the other was okay, sharing funny stories from the day. There was no rushing, no expectations. Just simple words and small gestures that slowly built trust again. Over time, the sisters began to meet for lunch, help each other with errands, and occasionally share chores like picking up groceries. Every visit, every shared meal, was a reminder that they could care for each other without losing themselves. Zawadi had learned a lesson she would never forget. Love didn't mean giving up your own life or peace. Sometimes, setting boundaries was the truest form of love, and she held her ground without anger, without guilt, simply with calm strength. Meretta learned a lesson too. She saw that leaving didn't mean abandoning family, and that independence could coexist with love. Watching Zawadi manage her life calmly, earn her own success, and still make room for her sister's growth opened Meretta's eyes. She understood that mistakes didn't have to define relationships, and that patience and respect could heal old wounds. She began to take responsibility for her actions, managing her small room and her life without leaning too heavily on anyone else. Months passed, and the sisters' bond grew quietly but steadily. They laughed without jealousy, shared successes without competition, and supported each other in ways that were healthy and balanced. Zawadi's apartment remained her sanctuary, and Meretta's little room became a place of independence and learning. In the end, both sisters discovered a new kind of love, one rooted in respect, understanding, and boundaries, proving that sometimes walking away is just the first step to coming closer again. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.